Hi there, and welcome to this episode 9 of the ADHD Adult UK podcast. I'm James Brown, co-founder of ADHD Adult UK, and as always, sadly, I'm joined by the man with a cake pop for a head, Alex Connor, who's also a co-founder of ADHD Adult UK. Alex, hi.
Hello, sunshine.
Hello, sunshine. Hello, sunshine.
Yeah, you're my sunshine.
You that must burn your lips as it comes out of your mouth, calling me your sunshine.
Not at all. You're a ray of joy in my life, James.
I'm sure I am. How are you doing? You okay?
I'm rather well, thank you. Yeah, really well, actually. And yeah, very excited about the podcast. We've started to hit quite big numbers of downloads, which is amazing.
Well, like 10.
10, but yeah, 10 people. Like my mum. No, like thousands of really odd people listening to our nonsense about ADHD. I know that because we're getting actual emails every day. Can I read one out?
You please do.
Okay, very quickly. The first one is Robert from Kidderminster has written, Alex, why don't you do the podcast on your own? It would be immeasurably better. Robert.
Robert from Kidderminster.
Yeah.
That just happens to be my dad's name.
And where he's from. Yeah, okay, I made that one up. But this one's real. This one is from Adam, who has said, thank you. That's what he said, which is really, really lovely. So he wrote, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. That's what I want to say. If you're busy and don't have the focus to read the rest of my ramblings, you can stop here. Adam, we read the rest of your ramblings. They weren't ramblings. They were wonderful and amazing. I'm not going to read them out because there's lots of personal stuff in them. We read them all and we really loved it. What Adam did say is I'd like to request a topic, and that is ADHD combined with high intelligence. So we're going to talk about intelligence because it's a really interesting topic in another podcast, but not this one. James, what are we doing?
Yes, so as you know, our podcasts come in 3 parts, a tragedy in 3 parts. We pick a theme. In the last episode, we talked about pre-referral, the emotions, the planning that goes in place, what it feels like when you're waiting to get that diagnosis. And we were joined, very sadly, by Mrs. ADHD, my wife. And the really annoying thing is you've had good download figures for that episode, and it's killing me that the best download figures so far had Sam in. So that's frustrating.
Finally, somebody funny.
Exactly, yeah. So in this episode, we're talking about a really interesting phenomenon, which may or may not have a scientific basis in adults with ADHD, but it's definitely something that lots of us talk about in one guise or another. We're going to discuss something which is called object invisibility, or sometimes object impermanence. As usual, the 3 parts of the podcast include a bit of psychoeducation, evidence-based information about, in this case, object invisibility or impermanence, our personal reflections on what the theme means to us, and then we'll give you some top tips, and we'll play the game, What Did James Lose? Forget?
Boo.
Yeah, yes, we will later on in the episode as well. So, Alex, what's object invisibility, and why do some people call it object impermanence, particularly you? Is it because you're foolish?
Yeah, it is because I'm a fool. You're an object. I'm treating you as invisible for the rest of this. Okay, right. So very briefly, this really does do what it says on the tin. Object invisibility is a way of saying out of sight, out of mind. And it seems that for people with ADHD, out of sight, out of mind is a particularly big problem. We're going to use the example of if you stick something in a drawer a lot today. For many people, regardless of diagnosis, once it's in a drawer, you might forget you have that thing, and forget which drawer you put it in the first place. And for people with ADHD, that's particularly problematic. So forgetting what drawer you put it in could be more to do with the working memory problems that come with executive dysfunction. But forgetting all about it once it's in the drawer is object invisibility. So it really feels like objects are invisible to you or out of your mind if they're in a drawer. Or even worse, if they've been in front of you for a while. I've got Post-it notes on my computer screen that may as well not be there if they've been there for more than a day. I'm not ignoring them. I almost literally don't see them. To me, they are invisible. My ADHD adult brain is ignoring them for me. Other brands of Post-it notes are probably available, but I don't know what to call them. Sticky back somethings. Big Post-it note we're funded by. So this is often referred to not as object invisibility in the community, but as object permanence, knowing something's permanently there, even if you can't see it. The problem with that is some people get cross about using that term, because actually the argument is that you don't completely deny the existence of this thing. And object permanence is only truly found for small babies under sort of 6-9 months old. If you take their toy away and hide it, they literally don't know it exists. That is a lack of object permanence, which we develop as a human. So object invisibility means, rather than, oh, I don't know that the concept of that thing exists, we rather don't remember that we have it. So object invisibility. Here's the thing, though. This isn't evidence. James and I discuss this a lot, and we think that with our ADHD, sometimes object impermanence might actually be more accurate. We sometimes literally don't know things that we have in a drawer exist, or even people that aren't in our current sphere exist if we see them. There are many documented issues with grief experienced wrongly or differently by adults with ADHD. So we talked about that as well, haven't we, James? Like remembering that even your mum exists if you're not thinking about that person at the time.
I'm really glad you gave the example of Post-it notes. Other sticky pads are available, because living in a house where both of us have ADHD, our house is ridiculously messy. In fact, once when we left the back door open accidentally, it took us about 5 minutes to work out if we'd been burgled or not. We had to walk around and look and think, well, has someone burgled us? We can't tell. That's how messy our house gets. And we, around a year ago, I think, decided to put up Post-it notes on certain parts of the wall saying, tidy me. And they sat there for 4 months because they just, as you said, they literally became invisible. I could not see that Post-it note in front of my face as I was looking at a wall doing something. And that's why I think it's such a fascinating concept, is that it's not just, as you said, the thing that happens to almost anybody, that you put something away in a drawer and you can forget it's there. It really is that unless something is not just in your direct line of vision, but is part of what you're doing that day, unless something is around you, in your possession, is directly involved in your activities, it just disappears. It doesn't become something that you are aware of. And that can include people. I have forgotten I've got a mum at times, which is a ridiculous thing to say, but it's true.
I totally get it. Honestly, it's mad. I mean, it is why people report with ADHD report that we don't grieve properly. I use the word properly as a joke word. Don't be angry with me. We have inappropriate emotional reactions to everything, don't we? ADHD people. That's what it is. And grief is yet another one that we're inappropriate about. What does the science say about it? About ADHD and object impermanence or invisibility? Do we have it more than others? Does anybody have it? Actually, the science is really, really limited in people looking at this. This very, very ripe for the study. So if we've got any behavioral scientists out there who want to get in on that, we would love to hear from you. But anecdotally, it's all over the place, and it seems to split people into whether they're a hoarder or an absolute minimalist wanting to just keep everything clear. Kind of where I've developed my personality is towards minimalism, because I just don't bother buying stuff. I open a drawer and there's 3 things that are in there that I just didn't know were in there, and some of them I thought I would use every day forever, and I just didn't. Absolute rubbish.
And I totally get that. When we move on to the personal reflections, a lot of it will be the similar kind of observations to that of purchasing multiple things, etc. So it would be interesting to hear from any listeners if this is something that that's part of your ADHD, or something that happens to you.
Are we calling people listeners?
What
I like that.
Followers, listeners?
I don't know. I've never really thought about the fact that anybody but you and me pays any attention to
well, true. Well, the 10 people that do listen multiple times.
Yeah.
If Jules, if you're listening, if you have an issue with object invisibility, then get in touch with Alex, which I know is a complete ball ache because he's such an annoying person to speak to. But yeah, get in touch and let us know. It's something we're really interested in, and because there's not a great wealth of scientific data out there, this is why I think it's interesting to me, because it's something that anecdotally from my point of view, is a big part of my ADHD.
It is mine too, but also a big part of the guilt. And that's the point of all of this, isn't it? If you're feeling in any way guilty about having something in a drawer that you've then ordered on Amazon anyway because you forgot you had it, or you've just completely forgotten it was a waste of money, it's the ADHD tax. ADHD team, it isn't our fault. It's a part of the system, probably.
It is. Can I ask you a question, Alex? Before we end section 1 and move on to personal reflections, we talked about forgetting people. Now, I know you haven't got many friends for obvious reasons, but one of the things that I think possibly falls into this category is, again, forgetting those friends exist. So I'm a shit friend. I mean, I'm a really shit friend. I don't message people very often, and it's not because I don't want to or because I don't like messaging. I forget they exist, and it's when friends, and I have got one or two, message me, I think, oh yeah, and reply, and obviously love talking to them, but I just forget that. I forget that whole, I wouldn't say swathes because that suggests I've got lots of friends, but I forget that groups of people literally forget they exist, and therefore it would not occur to me to ever contact them, because why would you contact someone that doesn't exist? And is that, do you think, kind of the same thing?
It is, and in fact, in the diagnostic criteria, one of the negative or deleterious effects of ADHD is trouble maintaining relationships, and that doesn't always just mean having a traditional partner relationship. It means all relationships, and the executive function of remembering to type the email and say, hi, how are you, is difficult because we have executive functions. Combine that with object invisibility, that it's just not on your radar. It's no wonder that we often lose a lot of friendship circles. You lose them for very different reasons, though. Absolutely awful human.
Mostly Sam, obviously driving people away with her behaviors, but yeah, no, I get that. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of part 1. In part 2, we'll give you some of our personal reflections on how object invisibility affects us.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of episode 9 of our ADHD Adult UK podcast. We're talking today about object invisibility, object impermanence, if you prefer. Out of sight, out of mind. We've done a little bit of psychoeducation, which is too grand a word for what we did. But now we're going to do some personal reflections of what that means for us, because we've already established it's a big part of our lives. James, tell me about your experiences of this object invisibility and what you call it.
Yeah, so to me, it really is object invisibility. Things don't exist if they're not in my direct line of sight. And sometimes if they are in my direct line of sight, they don't exist. And I think this, if you marry it with the issues in working memory, it makes everyday life and maintaining, function at work and relationships really difficult. So an issue that I've got, and we're going to talk about this in a later episode when we talk about impulse buying. One of the reasons that I'm in absolutely fucking mountains of debt is because I often buy things I've already got multiple times. And sometimes that's just because, out of impulse, I want another guitar. So I bought several guitars over lockdown. I haven't really played many of them, but sometimes it's because I don't know I've got something. And I think a really nice example is Sam and I managed to get away. Christ, this has been going on. The pandemic's been going on for so long. At some point between one of the lockdowns, we managed to get away for a short break. But I realized when I looked at my passport, I remembered my passport had less than 6 months on it. So I didn't have time to order a new one. So I booked one of the in-person appointments to go up to Liverpool to get a new passport and paid £170 to do that. And then they got back in touch with me and said, you renewed your passport last year. I didn't know, because I didn't know my passport existed, where it was. All I could remember was vaguely at some point in the past it needed renewal, but to me that was, oh god, yeah, it's got 6 months left. The £170, even though they weren't issuing a new passport, was non-refundable, because apparently that's the fee for the administration associated with this. So in terms of, again, ADHD tax, that's 170 quid I lost because I didn't know I had a passport, which was actually just sat in a drawer, which we call the imminent drawer, that has all the things in that we imminently need.
The imminent draw.
Yeah, the imminent draw. And I didn't know that passport existed. So I paid 170 quid to get an email back saying, you've got a passport, you dickhead. You don't need a new one.
Fuck. That is amazing.
Thank you. And what about you? Have you got any personal reflections about this? I'm guessing you've got lots, knowing you.
I have. So I really like the term object impermanence, even though it's only for babies, because I think like you don't think they exist. I'm not aware of them. It's not just where's my cheese. It's gone. It's gone. But it's more sort of a constant source of niggly annoyance for me, that I have a loft full of things that I've subsequently had to acquire again because I have no memory they exist. I don't think they exist. Running gloves or sunglasses, often seasonal stuff. My children, for example, or a hat that I particularly like.
Sorry, can I stop you there? You seasonally replace your children?
Well, yeah. Well, when you lose something, you lose it. No, not children, but stuff, absolutely stuff. And that is why I think I'm a minimalist, because I don't want to be. It's just so heartbreaking and embarrassing when you don't ever use anything you think you're storing up, or I'll have so many things that are out of their sell-by date because I've bought them, I've put them in a food cupboard, they've gone. If it's not the cupboard that I always look into with the salt in. I mean, and all that's niggly, it's not that big a deal. But I think that gets a bit more problematic for me is grief.
Yeah.
And I have looked into it, and I know that it's a thing where a lot of adults with ADHD don't grieve properly. But I really don't, and it makes me feel like the psychopath. You know I am the one, but I do feel these things. I feel them very, very differently, I think, to how other people report grief. But a lot of the time it isn't. I mean, it sounds good, but it's not, because we don't live in a cultural environment where it's appropriate. I had a relative, my aunt, who died, and I went to call about three years later, and I just didn't remember. This is someone quite dear to me, quite very important. It's not that I don't have the feelings, and I didn't have the grief feelings over again. But it was humiliating, and I didn't feel like a proper person, which is a common complaint for me. That's a bit serious. Mainly, it's just forgetting my glasses.
I know. I was desperately at every point trying to think of some kind of way to interject with an insult or some kind of put down, and I couldn't. And I hate you for that, to be honest.
She had a cool name as well. My aunt's name was Vesta, like the curry. That's Auntie Vesta, like first name. Amazing.
Vesta the curry.
The Vesta is a make of curries, James. I don't know why we have these conversations.
No, I don't know why we do this podcast, to be honest, Al. So, yeah, no, I think that's a really interesting observation. That the grieving, the forgetting that an event or a person isn't there is equally as impermanent or as invisible as forgetting a person is there. And I've had the same thing with a work colleague that passed away, and I and Sam both would frequently suddenly remember that had happened, and then have to revisit those feelings of, oh God, I can't believe that person's not there, because we'd forgotten they weren't. And that, you're right, it's associated with guilt and shame. And I forget that happened because that person was important. But
I'd like to know if that's ADHD or if that's everyone, because obviously we don't know.
Yeah,
because
that
feels like
it is, and I think because Sam and I both have ADHD, or whilst Sam is waiting for her diagnosis, both having the same experience with that person, it could be either. But I think it for me, it fits in neatly, whether someone is with us or not, with them, like you say, out of sight, out of mind. If you're not dealing with that grief, if you're not having to deal with a person who's there or not every day, they can literally disappear.
Yeah.
Not you normally pick up on that. You normally say not literally, and I'm amazed that you didn't. And now I've pointed it out, which is just giving you an open goal.
I love your liberal use of the word literally. I was literally hanging about the flat.
Yeah.
Combat.
I adore your grammar Nazism and the ability you've got to correct me every term. Thank you. Okay, so that brings us nicely onto the latest edition. I love. God, it sustains me to look at your annoyance with this. It brings us to the latest episode of What's James or Lost or Forgotten this week. So my recollection is you've got 3 points now, Alex, haven't you? 3 out of 6, I think it is, which is pretty good. It's average, which describes you as a person, obviously.
Thank you.
So, as usual, there are 3 options of things that I've either forgotten, mislaid, or lost this week. So your 3 options are that I lost my 4th scarf. So it was the 4th of a series of 4 scarves that I'd lost. That I lost an email I sent to myself, which was really, really important, or that I lost all my working underpants.
I want to get into the grammar of, or the syntax of working underpants.
Yes, yeah. Well, the ones that haven't got holes in, which are there as emergency underpants. No, you've got,
non-working underpants. I understand.
Yeah, you've got your working underpants and your emergency underpants. I mean,
you mean dusters, don't you? They're dusters, James.
Pretty much, yes.
Right, this is a good one. I think it's definitely not the scarf thing. Fat neck, don't need a scarf. I think important email. I don't think that's exciting enough because I reckon that happens to you every day. I'm going to say the third thing that I've forgotten. What was it?
The third thing was all my working pants.
Working memory. I think it's working pants.
Okay, and you're wrong. So you've still got 3 points, but now at 7. It's actually my 4th scarf. So, and I had 4 beautiful scarves. One was Paul Smith, one was All Saints. Expensive scarves. Don't know where they are. Literally do not know where they are. They're not in the house or the car. I may have left them at someone else's house. I don't think I did, but it's cold now. And although I've got a fat neck, thank you, sometimes it's nice to add a scarf to that fat neck for a bit of warmth, but I currently can't because the scarf, and I only bought this about a month ago, has gone. So, well done, Alex, for not getting any points. We'll now pop away for a break, and when we come back, we'll give you some top tips on how to deal with object invisibility or impermanence.
Welcome back to episode 9 of our ADHD Adult UK podcast, part 3. We're talking about object invisibility, object impermanence. I sometimes call it objective impermanence because I'm a foolish fool. Out of sight, out of mind stuff. Partly executive function issues, maybe working memory problems. The reasons are nebulous and unclear, but it seems common, a very, very commonly reported thing. So we're going to talk about, do we have tips? Have we received any tips? James, what do you do about this, about out of sight, out of mind?
I'll be honest, Al. I've not got many tips that work. This is the reason that I have many, many different items which are identical, because I do keep on buying them because I forget about them. I've tried things, so I can certainly tell you what doesn't work. And that's, oh God, I can't even admit this. I even had a spreadsheet of all the things I own and where they were.
What? How detailed did it go? Pencil?
Stationary, yeah. Like collectively, I had a spreadsheet of everything that I owned and where it was. And I thought, this is perfect, because if I ever need to find anything, I just search on the spreadsheet. But obviously, I stopped. I didn't even finish filling it in, let alone continue to fill it in or amend it. And I thought this was going to solve all my problems. And clearly, that was a shit coping mechanism.
Yeah, terrible.
So rather than a top tip, all I've got is there's something that probably won't work for you, and that's a list of everything you own and an indication of where it is in your house. Have you got anything? And let's face it, fucking anything is. Have you got anything better than that, Alex?
I don't think anybody has ever had anything worse than that as a tip. Like anything, if someone said, I just scrawl it on my own chest in crayon, that would be better than half-arsedly doing a spreadsheet you then don't look at. I doubt you even remembered the spreadsheet exists, ironically, did you?
Write it on the wall in human feces is probably a better coping mechanism.
Just stationery and your own shit on the wall. Wow, my tip's so much better than yours. I've got a few. The first thing is trying to get a routine going of a place for everything and try not to deviate from that place, because I'm a nightmare with my staff card. I've got a place where I put it, and then if suddenly it's the last, I finish work on a Thursday instead of a Friday, I'm going on holiday, I'll go, oh, I'll put this somewhere even safer, in a shoe or something, because that's much safer than my normal place. And then 2 weeks later, obviously, or even 2 minutes later, no memory, and I'm running around, I'm screaming red face, why am I like this? I hate myself, like slamming into things, no one looking at me. So I try and stick to a place for everything. But a really good way, because of the problem of drawers being closed, is an open box just for me. Don't share that box. Next to the front door of my house, and I know, James, you have this too, is an open box that's just for me. The stuff I use every day, the gloves I'm currently wearing, the glasses I currently have to wear for the car, my staff card, anything that I'm using at the moment, pretty much every day, goes in there. Other stuff goes in different specific boxes, and there is no room for ambiguity in this, or it's all gone. Don't share. If I don't know exactly where I'm going to put something away, I will put it somewhere bafflingly cryptic. If you heard our time blindness podcast, this is a bit like James's trousers. So, do you remember that story? I'm leaving that for anybody who hasn't listened, because it's a weird thing to say.
Were you saying, do I remember the story where I lost my trousers?
Yes, you lost.
Yeah. I am. Yes, I am aware of that story, Alex, of when I lost and still haven't found my suit trousers. Thank you for reminding me. Oh, well, very easily if it's me. Very easily. Do your boxes work? I mean, it's a top tip.
They work really well, as long as it's not too convoluted. It's just an open box before the front door. And then the other thing I have for seasonal stuff now is see-through box. If you've got a garage or a loft, if you're lucky enough to have that, a see-through box with a lid that is only for, beach stuff, only for... I mean, I have so many hobbies that I don't do anymore. But, my surfing things, my rock climbing things, I haven't done rock climbing in 20 years. You never know. Might start again. Losing faith in these tips. I pretend I'm an eco warrior by embracing minimalism. I also write a list of things I impulsively want, and if any of those lists, if anything's repeated on that, I then ask my family if I already own them. Yes, that's another thing I do.
I imagine that would be useful. Again, living with somebody that's got ADHD, if I was to ask Mrs. ADHD, do you know if she's better than me.
We remember different things. That's the issue, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true. She is better at remembering items, but she is also a massive impulse spender. So I'm not sure she'd stop me from buying another version.
What I have noticed is that when I don't buy something and then I find it again, I feel like I'm winning at jobs and winning at life. So it gives me that emotional reward.
That is true. Unless, of course, you have bought something else to replace it, and then you feel like a massive loser.
Oh no, I don't like that. Yeah,
it's like an amplified version of the finding a fiver in your wallet, which is always more valuable than a fiver you've got, because all of a sudden it's, oh my god, I've got extra money. And you're right, if you do find something that you completely forgot existed, it can be a great feeling, but equally that's kind of counterbalanced by the number of times that I've already replaced that thing that I've already got and spent a shitload of money on it. Okay, before we wrap up, Alex, do you have a product recommendation of the week?
I do, and I was going to do a different one, but what I'm going to say is get yourself an open box. You can either just get a free open box, that looks nice enough for you to have in your front room, but you can also buy really, really nice faux leather ones or anything like that from, Swedish self-pack big chain shops, from rainforest names, tax-avoiding scumbag companies, or from your independent supplier. But get yourself a box. That is my product tip of the week, James.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, that was episode 9 of the ADHD. Blah, 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 blah. I'll say that again. Well, it's normally you.
Can we leave this bit in?
We can do if you want, yeah.
Thank you.
Right. Well, that was episode 9 of the ADHD. Oh, fucking Christ.
I'm loving this.
I bet you are.
Oh, man. Your only job is to talk.
I know. And
what was that? What was that, James? That was what?
Shut up just for a second. Right. That was episode 9 of the ADHD Adult UK podcast, in which we spoke about object invisibility and I lost the ability to talk. Obviously, if you'd like to get in touch with us about this or any other matters, contact us on the socials at ADHDadultUK on Instagram or Twitter, or visit our website, and we will see you next time. Goodbye.
That was easy for you to say. Bye all.